I want you to embark on a journey with me for a brief moment here. Close your eyes, if you will, and imagine that you're living in the month of our Lord and Savior, May 2020, and ask yourself, what were you doing then? Were you catching up on work that you were unable to get done before the lockdown hit? Were you taking the time to relax and take a break from the monotonous day-to-day life you used to live? Were you perhaps worrying about the state of the world, or more importantly, how your life would be altered by such a revolutionary event in history? Well, I sure as hell wasn't doing any of that. I was animating dragons to the Hamilton soundtrack. So, a bit of backstory. Back in early 2020, when we all thought we were just getting an elongated spring break, I was taking advantage of the time off school by drawing. A lot. Like, a lot. At the time, it had been almost exactly a year since I started actually taking art seriously as a hobby, and I hadn't even been doing digital art for like a year yet. So while I had very little experience in doing anything, what I did have was an unholy amount of motivation, and that's really all I ever needed. I was also really fucking annoying back then. Which, I mean, I'm sure I still am, but I'm talking like, I would quote Hamilton lyrics in the middle of history class, and I put a Hamilton song on a playlist we were making for the school dance, and I read Wham's fanfiction out loud to my classmates. God, what was wrong with me? Anyways, all this to say, while other people were worrying about a virus that was taking over the planet at an alarming rate, I was busy spending the beginning of my quarantine just drawing dragons, singing the Hamilton songs, and nothing else. And during this time, I conceptualized and made an animatic to the song Nonstop, which, to the two people in the audience who don't know, is 6 minutes long, which is a lot, and to this day still the longest project I've ever done. But I didn't let that stop me. For around 2 weeks straight, all I would do is sit on my bed, listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, and work on this project day and night, and I was pretty proud of myself when I finally got it done. So, on May 15, 2020, I uploaded it to my YouTube, and woke up the next day to realize that some of my biggest inspirations had seen it, and it became my most popular video within a few weeks, and now looking at it makes me want to die. I've actually been wanting to redo this project since like May of last year, but I've just continually put it off because things just kept coming up. You need to understand that a 6-minute animatic is a lot of work, and at the pace I was getting art done throughout the school year last year, that would have been around a 3-month investment, maybe even more. I also wasn't really into Wings of Fire or Hamilton anymore, which, thank God, by the way, and there were so many projects that I had ideas for at the time that I would have rather worked on. It was just a lot of work and time I'd be spending on something that I ultimately wasn't too passionate about, and would probably end up losing motivation for halfway through anyways. So I shelved the idea and went on with my life with the thought lingering at the back of my head. So now let's fast forward to the present, when I was struck by a brilliant idea. What if I just did it in a single day? So, funny story, I actually recorded myself watching the original Animatic for the first time in like 2 years, where I reacted to it and talked about everything I wanted to change, but then I forgot to record the thing I was reacting to, and then lost the audio, so, oops. Going into this, I had 2 goals in mind. 1. I wanted to try and keep it as faithful to the original Animatic as possible, while 2. Finding a way to finish it quicker than the original. The original Animatic, according to the video description, took exactly 24 hours. However, that number is actually like the recorded time that Procreate has that tells you how long you spend with a specific canvas open. And if I were to add up the amount of time I spent editing it, I'd say it rounds out closer to around 30 hours. So that wasn't gonna cut it if I wanted to sleep that day. I actually didn't figure out the style I wanted to do the Animatic in until I started and animated the first scene. So I'll talk about that when I get there. Meanwhile, I wanted to talk about the things I wanted to change about the script and art itself. So this script, God, it's so bad. I still like the idea of it, and I think in theory, this could have been like really cool. The idea was like, it showed the conflict of the Dragoness of Destiny having to like leave their tribes and biological families behind to like, start Jade Mountain Academy and all that. And it focused on the conflict of Glory having to stay behind and all. But like, God, this original script jumped around so much. If it weren't for like the captions I added last minute, which you can see at the bottom here, you'd have no idea what was going on in any of this. I didn't actually do much planning before I started the Animatic, but I did go back and revise the script slightly a few days before I started animating to center it more around like tsunami and give it more of a central theme. I still don't think it's like good or anything, and if I wanted to get it to a point where I was completely happy with it, I'd probably have to rewrite like 50% of it, and that would have deviated a little bit too much from the original for me. So this was the best I could do for now. As for the art itself, obviously, I've gotten better at anatomy and all that, and my style's developed, but also the original Animatic felt weirdly two-dimensional and lacking depth, if that makes sense. Like, the camera does like one thing throughout the whole video, and there are like 4 different shots I just reused over and over, and everything just felt the same, and there was no depth to any of the backgrounds, and it just felt really flat when I was watching it. I feel like that's something I've tried to work on a lot over the past month or so, especially on Earth, which was the Animatic, the last Animatic I've done. So I was really excited to try it out again and see how much I've improved on this front. And so, with the roughest idea of what I wanted to do, I went to bed, mentally preparing myself for the challenge that would face me the next day. I didn't actually start until a week later because I realized that a new Better Call Saul episode was premiering on Monday, and being real with myself, I was not going to get any work done that entire day, but then I was busy for the rest of the week, so I didn't start until that Friday, but that's irrelevant. For the sake of story, I started the day right after I had the idea. I woke up bright and early on the morning of July 29th, and I immediately had a headache. There was also a fly at my desk that morning that wouldn't leave me alone when I was eating breakfast, so you could say I was already off to a great start. I started working at 11:17 a.m., and the first thing I did was draw up designs for the 5 main characters. As you can see in the footage here, the initial plan was to use a sort of darker, desaturated color that also corresponded to the character color to shade the sketches. I mean, like I sketched out like a very sketchy, and you get the point, you see what I'm doing here. But as I was working on the first scene, that kind of fell through, and I ended up just coloring the entire character, similar to the way it looks in the original Animatic, just a lot less clean. This also ended up resulting in my colors being a lot more desaturated, at least for the main 5 in the new version, which is something I actually prefer the original Animatic for. But, I mean, I was like 3 scenes in when I thought I wanted to change it, and at that point it was too late, so whatever, oh well. I just clapped, I don't know. It was during this time that I also cemented the way I wanted to do backgrounds. I kind of just added a sort of base gradient on the bottom, and I would roughly sketch it over, which saves me time and also saves me the headache of having to draw backgrounds. You can see in the original Animatic that all of like the backgrounds are just like, I think I drew like one background for like most of the scenes and just stretched it over, and it's really noticeable, and it's like the perspective is all gone. Yeah, you can see like what I mean with the like lacking depth. And yeah, I'm still really bad at drawing backgrounds, but at least it doesn't look as bad as this anymore. The last thing I wanted to talk about here. The editing style stays pretty consistent throughout the entire Animatic, I think. I did a very simple, like, bouncy thing going on here in between the frames. I don't know what I'm about to say is going to make sense to anyone, but usually when I tween, I'll have like 3 keyframes, with 2 being in the very beginning, and the first 2 having a really drastic movement in between, and then the third one just having like a sort of little movement and stretched out over a longer period of time to make it like the movement linger. I know this doesn't make any sense, but it's something that I learned like a year or so ago, and I've been kind of just doing ever since. But on a whim for this Animatic, I decided I would cut out like the last keyframe and only use the first 2, which I don't think is like better than the style I used to use. I think it's actually a little worse, but I think this gave it a sort of bouncy like look to it that I was really fond of for this, and I think it also saved me like some time, so I think I'm happy with the editing mostly. So anyways, enough of that stuff. Something else I was noticing during the first 2 hours or so, my computer was lagging. Not like in a noticeable way, and if I wasn't like doing this challenge, I probably would not have noticed. But as I was exporting the first frames for the first scene, I realized that it took maybe like a split second longer for these frames to render, which, while that's not much, it was concerning because I would have to export a lot of frames, and those split seconds would add up. To add on, when I was switching to Sony Vegas to edit the first scene, I also noticed that the playback itself was lagging, which once again was concerning, but I could work around it. As long as it didn't get worse, it was no big deal. As I moved on to the second verse, things were starting to get concerning. At around 3 PM, I opened Discord to check something, and everything in the app was frozen. Alright, I then went into Task Manager and reset the app, and everything was fine again. 3 minutes later, I checked Discord again, and oops, everything's frozen. That's concerning. A small side note here, because I wasn't sure where to put this in, but I had like a molasses cookie around this time, and I've never had molasses before, right? I thought it was like a type of fish before I got these cookies. Like, they have such a weird aftertaste. Like, the cookie itself tasted fine, right? Like, the first few bites, it tasted like sugar or whatever. But by the time I got to like the end of the cookie, it tasted like completely different. Like, is this supposed to do- I knocked my water bottle. Is this supposed to do that? Like, what? Like, I hope I wasn't being poisoned. Anyways, around 2 hours later, I opened Sony Vegas and I started looking around the audio later in the timeline to mentally script some later verses, and oh no! The file I was using for audio got corrupted. I had run into the same problem when I was working on Earth a few weeks ago, where, for some reason, even though the audio was fine when I first imported it into the timeline, at around the 4-minute mark, everything would break, and it would just play like previous sections of the audio over and over when it wasn't supposed to, and didn't play what was actually supposed to be there. And because this only happened so far into the project, and it doesn't happen the first time you put it into the project, you don't notice until you're like halfway through. And then at that point, the only way to fix it is to find another file containing the same audio but from a different source, and then import that in and use that instead, which means your audio is still like a millisecond out of sync, and no one but you notices it, but you notice it, and it bothers you for the rest of eternity, and every time you watch it, it makes you want to die. Please, why are you like Anyways, yeah, so that happened. And after I scrubbed around the ending of the audio, I went back to the beginning of the timeline when the audio just broke on me, I guess. It just kept repeating like the beginning of the song over and over, and I couldn't exit Vegas no matter how hard I tried. And honestly, I thought this was my punishment for the sins I committed when I was 13, and that this was my hellish purgatory that I was doomed to live in for the rest of my life because I accidentally read smut of the American Founding Fathers at one night. Oh god, my PC crashed. You may have noticed that I don't have any footage from this time, and that I am instead showing the recording of me drawing the thumbnail a few days later after I finished the project. And that's because the recording, unsurprisingly, had just completely corrupted on me when my PC just broke. And as I was starting my PC back up, I was also starting to worry that my more important files would also corrupt, and that I wouldn't be able to finish this video because I'd lose all my progress, and I'd have to restart, and I'd lost all my motivation to do this, and I would just never draw dragons again, and okay, oh well, everything's back and nothing broke. Okay, cool. From there, it was smooth sailing for a bit. I took a break at around 8 PM that I intended to be only like 10 minutes on, and then I got distracted by Spotify, and oops, half an hour went by. Now, fun fact about me. Horror is one of my favorite genres, both in general and especially horror movies and shows, and I find that the things I see in these horror elements don't tend to ever freak me out for too long. Like, I'll watch things and I'll be deeply unsettled by them, but rarely will something ever keep me up at night, which I honestly take as a blessing because I already have enough trouble falling asleep as it is. On the contrary, however, by the time we were approaching 11 PM, I was starting to get deeply unsettled just simply existing in my house at night. I got up at around 11:23 to get some water, and walking away from my work area into the kitchen, I was so sure that something was going to jump out at me. Which, by the way, this was obviously not the first time I've stayed up this late, but usually when I do, it's when I'm studying, or cramming an assignment, or falling down a rabbit hole on YouTube and losing track of time. This particular day, though, I was watching conspiracy theory and true crime videos on YouTube, and something about this combination of the eerie silence in the house whenever I took off my headphones, to all the lights but the closest one to my desk being turned off, and god, I was so sure that something was ready to jump out at me. Like, I'm not joking when I say that around midnight, I was starting to genuinely be too terrified to walk away from my desk. And I had to turn off all the lights in the house, because I was so sure that something was lurking in the corners. At one point, I remember hearing a car pull up outside, and I remember just putting down my tablet pen, looking out my window, and sitting there, for like 5 minutes straight, convinced that this was the end and I was going to die, before I was able to calm myself enough down to go back to drawing these dumb little dragons. So taking all of this into account, did I stop intentionally freaking myself out and start watching something more lighthearted to distract myself? No, I'm not a coward. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I pulled up Eddie We're Spring Forest Cafe video, and no joke, watched it 3 times in a row. After I was able to convince myself that no, the Illuminati was not out to get me, I was able to get through a good chunk of the animatic pretty quickly around midnight. Quick little fun fact, in the initial animatic, I think I mentioned this earlier, but the background throughout the entire gory tsunami conversation is just one background. Repositioned and resized throughout like the entire thing. Which like, yeah, I did it for the rest of the animatic, but this thing is like a minute and a half long, and it's so noticeable, and I don't know why I ever did that and thought it was a good idea. So, clearly, I felt the need to honor that tradition in the remake. I did end up, making 3 different versions of this background instead, because it just wouldn't, I couldn't. I don't know how past me ever let that slide, but I couldn't do that again. But, anyways, working on the door mover and peril scenes after the bit in the middle, where we and Tsunami yell at each other, I was, starting to genuinely relax, and really be at peace at how nice the melody of the song gets at this point. I was even starting to get somewhat nostalgic for my Hamilton phase. God, I was so annoying. But I was cringe but free, you know? Nowadays I'll write Pokemon fanfiction and then get so embarrassed I have to delete it from my docs the moment I finish. I miss the energy I once had where I could ramble for hours to my friends about some dead guys and not feel any shame about it. Maybe, just maybe, even though I was a pain to be around back then, it didn't matter because I was being myself. And maybe being stuck inside with only the internet for 2 years only ever served to give me anxiety, and worsen my mental state to make me too scared. Oh yeah, I also don't know how to cut a fucking bagel. Okay, so look, at around 3 AM, I decided to take a pretty long break to go get myself a snack, since I was feeling pretty hungry, so I went to make myself a bagel. So, naturally, I took out the knife, put down the cutting board, placed the bagel down, started cutting, and made a mess everywhere. So this is what the bagel looked like in the toaster. You can see one side looks perfectly fine, right? But the other, there's 10 different pieces I had to put in one by one, because I couldn't get the knife to make a clean cut down the middle. And here, that's the cutting board. I used 2 different knives, I think, because I think I used the wrong one initially, and I struggled for 10 minutes on this because I couldn't get the knife. I couldn't get the knife to go through the bread, right? And I think I was doing something wrong, because I don't think I was supposed to struggle this much. But what else? Yeah, no, I was definitely doing something wrong. I don't think I was supposed to cut it. I don't think cutting a bagel is supposed to be that hard. Oh yeah, while we're on this topic, can we talk about something else? Can we talk about the sauce? I think my parents got it from Costco a month or so ago, and it intrigues me so much. Because is it just called bitchin' sauce? If I were at a party, would I ask you, hey man, could you pass the bitchin' sauce? Just in a matter-of-fact voice? I think that it is called that, right? Because there's no other name on this package, I mean. But that just seems like bad branding. What if someone just didn't want to swear for any reason? Would they just not be able to tell you about this sauce? What if someone really, really, really liked this sauce, and they were on their deathbed, and they really wanted to taste it one last time, but they couldn't bring themselves to swear, so they couldn't ask the mourning people around them to go honor their final wish. It seems like the creators of the sauce just alienated a large part of the population, but just by how they named it. Just call it chili sauce or something. And they're selling this in Costco. I've never seen products with swear words in Costco before. I've never walked up to the counter and asked for a fucking hot dog or something like that. I'm not going crazy here, right? This is a weird name. This doesn't make any sense. They weren't lying though, the sauce does taste really good. At around 3:40 AM, I started working on the Animatic again, and I could feel the exhaustion catching up to me. Up until now, I was doing pretty well in that department, and I was feeling fine, but this was the moment when I started wanting to collapse onto my bed and not wake up for the next 3 days. My hands were also really sore at this point, and so were my arms, and what I'm basically getting at is that everything hurt and I wanted to die, but I was so close to being done that I couldn't just give up now. This is where the quality of the Animatic also very noticeably drops off, especially in the 2 bits that go why do you write you did blah 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 after the 51 essays bit, and the last bit was just 50 Hamilton songs overlapping and being sung at the same time. The script for this was really bad in the original Animatic, and I never really fixed it when I was revising the script, because I just figured I'd work on it when I get there. But when I got there, I was too tired to put any energy into making it look good, and I just stopped caring, and honestly I just wanted to go to bed. With how tired I was, I don't think I can adequately describe the feelings I was feeling at this time, so I'm not even going to attempt it. Instead, during this entire process, I was writing down notes and timestamps for things that were happening on my phone to make sure I didn't forget anything when I was writing the script later, so I'm just going to dramatically read these out. 4:28. Starting to get lighter outside. I don't feel tired, but I also feel like I'm hallucinating all the time, so I should probably get this finished before I go insane. 4:48. I'm flip-flopping so violently between fear, utter exhaustion, and wanting to go run a mile, that the whiplash could give me whiplash. 4:49. At what time does it count as staying up early instead of late? That's just a say. It's 4 or 5. 4:52. What do I do if this entire night was a dream and I wake up and have to do it again? 4:56. Colored on the wrong layer again. Why does this world hate me? 5:03. Got jump scared by a sound effect in the True Gooden video. 5:05. CSP is starting to crash, oh no. 5:10. Maybe Hamilton is my own personal purgatory. 5:16. Tired. 5:30. This script is so messy. 5:44. Recording got fucking corrupted again. I am so close. 6:05. The sun is rising. I hate everything. 6:10. Forgot to switch to fucking Windows again. Oh yeah, I should probably talk about that. I don't know. I'm very new to using OBS, right? So I don't know how to set this up properly. So I don't know if there's a way to do this. But because I switch between drawing and editing very frequently when I'm making projects, I was also manually switching the OBS recording to recording from Clip Studio Paint, the thing I draw on, and Sony Vegas, which I edit on. And which, of course, meant I forgot a lot when I was doing it, right? I think happened a total of 3 or 4 times, and I just lose the footage for that entire section. And I also, of course, then forgot to switch back to CSP for the last bit of footage I was drawing for the last bit with the Arc 2 cast. So that's fine. I just don't have the footage for the ending of this animatic. That's fun. That's a fucking play. I officially finished the final bit of editing at 6:23 a.m. and I started rendering, marking my final time at 18 hours and 46 minutes, which honestly I think is pretty fucking solid. The project finished rendering at 6:44, and during the time in between I listened to Cape Town on my phone and watched the sunrise, which I can safely say was the only good thing I did that day. So, what did I learn from this experience? Honestly, watching the end result again the next day when I woke up, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised by how happy I was with it. It could be a lot better, obviously, but with the amount of time I was limiting myself to, I'm satisfied with what I was able to accomplish. And watching it side by side with the old version, I was really struck by how much I've been able to change over the course of quarantine, both my personality, mentality, and my art. The old version is not very good, and I'm sure that in a year I'll look back at my new version and hate how it looks too, but I'm proud of myself for being able to come so far in only 2 years. And who knows, maybe I'll do this again in a few years, and be able to look back and be once again struck by how much I was able to accomplish in the short time I have on this planet. Who am I kidding? I'm never doing this again. Remember to like and subscribe.